Yeah, 모두 다 빨리 박수 쳐 기다리지 말고 서둘러 Reason that I'm back is to feed you raps and I see that you are 배불러 So fly
All right, welcome, Steve Kim. I have an awesome topic for us to discuss, one of my favorites, a daily dose of Stephen A. Smith. According to our friend Mike McCarthy at Front Office Sports, Stephen A. Smith is in line to get a $125 million contract from ESPN, $25 million a year. According to Mike McCarthy in Front Office Sports, it's because Stephen A. is more of a team player than Pat McAfee. He doesn't let Shams Charania and he doesn't let Aaron Rodgers come on his show and troll everybody. Stephen A. worth $125 million, $25 million a year. You buying this, Steve? Does he deserve this? Is he worthy of this?
Well, look, I'm a capitalist. You're worth what you can get. Congrats. No, I'm being dead serious. Look, do I think he's overpaid? I mean, that's not really for me to say. I have my opinions on it. But I do think ESPN has an interesting dilemma. They don't really have a great roster anymore. I mean, I grew up when there was Chris Berman, and then there was Dan Patrick, and the KO kid, Keith Olbermann. And basically, they had a launching pad where guys could do bigger and better things, like Craig Kilborn, right? I kind of look at what's going on at ESPN, and I don't know, is Amina Kimes really ready to be a primetime player? They tried to prop up Bro Monty Jones. That hasn't worked out. No show he's ever done has really been successful. They've had all these people that have tried to push this certain agenda, and the nation has basically repelled against him. Now, as it relates to Stephen A. Smith, look, the guy's a workhorse. He works hard. He's on various shows. And for better or worse, he is the face of ESPN, or at least he's the more acceptable one compared to the other guy, the former punter. So, I mean, is he worth it? I'm not so sure any vocation is worth that much. He's not curing cancer here, but he does play a large role, and the market is the market.
I want to play you a clip before I chime in here and be the hater and the bad guy, as always. I want to play you a clip from Patrick Bet-David where he calls Stephen A. Smith the GOAT of sports commentary. Play the clip.
Talk to me about what your vision is of what America should be.
What America should be. Okay, so
Yes.
Take a look at this. You're the greatest guy in sports commentating ever, right? You're the GOAT. Everybody calls you the GOAT.
I don't call myself
I'm not saying
that,
you
but
calling it.
it's
We
right.
get to say that. But you're the GOAT in the face of, if I want to find out what something happens with, hey, LeBron James' contract, 2 years, $102 million, and he didn't decide to take a lower contract to get,
104.
Paul, $104 million or whatever it is
Right.
to get Paul George or DeMar DeRozan or any of these guys, and Klay Thompson had the option, they went elsewhere. What does Stephen A. say about this? Oh, okay, got it. All right, I agree, disagree, but I want to know what you have to say, right? Okay.
The GOAT of sports commentary. Steve, I've nicknamed you the Korean Cosell. I think most people consider Howard Cosell the GOAT of sports commentary. Stephen A. Smith is again, this is Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese. This is Nikola Jokic versus, am I even comfortable calling Stephen A. Joel Embiid? But Stephen A. Smith, is this a worthy classification? Is he the Michael Jordan of sports commentary? Go ahead. Go, you first.
Well, my view is this. I've never actually heard anyone outside of Patrick Bet-David actually say you're the greatest of all time in that field. Now, is he going to be the most well-paid? Is he the most exposed or overexposed? Is he the one that's out there the most? Is he the most ubiquitous? Yes, but does that necessarily make him the greatest commentator of all time? You can make an argument he's not the greatest commentator now, but again, it's a little bit different though, Jason, because of YouTube and independent content creators, you get a lot more knowledgeable voices on specific subjects, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, all the way down to politics and culture, that I don't know if there isn't a Howard Cosell anymore. I mean, when I think back on the great sports commentators. And do you mean to a specific sport or in general? I know a lot of people don't like him, but Bob Costas for a long time was thought of as that guy, right? Then obviously there was Howard Cosell, who was incredibly dominant. But I don't know. But I'll be honest with you. When I thought of Stephen A. Smith, I think of him now as being potentially the most well-paid. I never thought of him as the greatest. I don't think he knows enough, to be honest with you.
Let me give you another candidate. Again, if you're going to put Costas in there, which I think is worthy, but Bryant Gumbel's commentaries on Real Sports used to be destination. Hey, can't see it. It would make news. What he had to say, the leagues would care and all that. Stephen A. Smith, without Twitter, what would he be? I mean, yes, there's Twitter reaction. Yes, there's blogosphere reaction. But before the blogosphere, before Twitter, there was, and Stephen A. existed during this time frame when he was out there as a commentator competing with everybody on equal terms, basically, at newspapers. When newspapers ran, there'd be a guy in Philly, a guy in Chicago, a guy in LA, a guy in Denver, guy in Kansas City. And we were all competing, Miami, we were all competing. Stephen A. Smith was virtually non-existent. He gets on ESPN, they tilt everything his direction, and look, I know I sound bitter and jealous, but I'm just keeping it real. Like, we live in a fantasy world, and people like Patrick Bet-David appear out of nowhere to help sell these other fantasies and other plants. But I mean, cut it out. As many mistakes, as many times. I mean, the guy went on, he's a hardcore New York Knicks fan. In the middle of their season, he's calling names of players who aren't even on the roster, who aren't on the team, who haven't played. I mean, and this is, if that was a one-off, if it wasn't a consistent 2 or 3 times a year thing, what is his profound commentary? Steve, and I know I'm asking a biased outside observer. I got to be careful because I just sound like I'm glossing myself. But Steve, you sit here and you can, Jason, remember when you wrote that Las Vegas column? Remember when you, the Don Imus thing? You remember when you did this? Remember when you did that? What's your remember when Stephen A. Smith said or did anything? What is
nothing? I mean, Jason, I can honestly tell you this, and I've told you this before. The last debate kind of conversation show that I ever watched on a consistent basis, and I watched about every single one, well, Speak for Yourself. First with Colin Cowherd, and then when you brought in Marcellus Wiley, I literally watched every episode. And then when you departed, I tried to give it a week or two, and I said, yeah, I'm going to unplug this. Stephen A. Smith, I actually did like his basketball coverage. I did. When he was specifically a guy out of Philadelphia, and he could kind of give you the inside scoop of what was going on with AI and his battles with Larry Brown, I found that to be compelling. And again, I told you this long ago, when he did that show on ESPN2, quite frankly, I think that was the name of that show. I enjoyed that show. I actually watched it on a regular basis, but I thought back then he was more contained about what he knew and what he spoke about. Now, I always find it interesting when he gives a boxing take. People actually think he knows boxing. Okay, so here's the thing that gets me about the general media in sports when they talk boxing. You're considered knowledgeable if you know more than 5 guys. And there are times he gives like these, there's times he gives like these opinions. I'm like, that is just insanity. It kind of reminded me, everyone thinks Jalen Rose is like this great boxing fan and he knows the sport. And one time he said, boy, you know a fight I'd like to watch? And we're all like, yeah. He goes, Canelo Alvarez against Vasyl Lomachenko. And I said, yeah, outside of the fact they're about 6 weight classes apart, and maybe you could play them in a video game simulation. And that's what I mean is like a lot of these guys know a little about a lot, but they don't know a lot about certain subjects. They really don't. And they're stretched too thin. And I do think with Stephen A. Smith, there's a bit of an overexposure. They tried to shoehorn him in to the UFC coverage about 5-6 years ago when they went over to ESPN. And Jason, that went over like passing gas in church. He got completely exposed.
Yeah, listen, I know I sound like a hater, and and maybe I shouldn't have even done the topic because it just puts me in a position where I'm just a hater. But I'm just speaking facts, man. I would like someone hop in the comments and tell me what the signature moment is or moments. Is it him dissing Kwame Brown? Because that only became a big deal when Kwame Brown chose to diss him back. I just don't know. Is your reputation off of, hey, I was the guy that criticized Kwame Brown for being a bust? Is that it? Again, you say it's his coverage of Allen Iverson, but I don't know if there were major stories he broke about Allen Iverson. Maybe there's some contract story that I'm just unaware of and can't think of. But when you start saying that someone is the greatest sports commentator of all time and he's worth $25 million a year, this is where my brain goes in terms of like, this is all a rigged simulation. This is all Matrix. And these are people that are supporting the Matrix who are just like Patrick McDavid. Is he represented by the same agents as Stephen A. Smith? Because it's such a nonsensical statement. It's like, Jason Whitlock is the greatest bodybuilder of all time. That's what it's the equivalent of. And it's like, how? Who? What? What are the qualifications? How are all these people? And again, we've Gumbel, Costas. Man, I don't even like this guy. Mike Lupica. Mike Lupica at one point had a reputation because of the sports reporters, because the columns he wrote at the New York Post or New York Daily News or wherever it was. Tony Kornheiser, Wilbon. Again, they start this whole debate genre. Kornheiser and Wilbon started. They had off the charts writing careers at the Washington Post. Won awards, decorated, then started the whole debate genre, and then on TV, and somehow Stephen A. Smith has surpassed them. This is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, well, look. Okay, so a memorable Stephen A. moment is when he wanted to backhand Malika Andrews when she tried to ransack him on his own show. And he said, he was about to go Ike to Tina with that backhand if he could have. So that's a memorable moment. Jason, you brought up Bryant Gumbel. Now, here's a guy that I grew up, I'm old enough that he was actually a local anchor at KNBC, the NBC affiliate in Los Angeles, and I got to see his rise. I used to be a huge admirer of Gumbel, and I would call a diehard avid fan of HBO Real Sports. I mean, literally, even after they got out of boxing and some of their shows got, just had a natural conclusion, I felt as though watching Real Sports once a month was worth the subscription. But right around the time of probably 7-8 years ago, I saw a slow transformation of that show just becoming a lefty, lunatic, liberal portal of woke ideas. And I'll never forget, they did a whole show during the pandemic, almost celebrating the fact that not only do we have to shut down all the sports, we should. And I said to myself, okay, they've jumped the shark. And I remember Bernie Goldstein, I think is his name, or Bernard Goldberg, basically said, I'm out of here. I cannot do this anymore. And the show, I thought, really became really dishonest. And what I would do, Jason, in the last year or two, I would actually just DVR the show, and I'd look at the previews of what was coming up. And literally 3 out of every 4 segments had this like literal liberal woke agenda. And then they would do a meat and potatoes football story. So what I would do is I'd only watch that segment. And then even the Gumbel wrap-ups, you're absolutely right, Jason. His 2-minute monologue was must-see television, and it was compelling. It was insightful. But then even that became just a bunch of whining from a really bitter guy. And it's unfortunate. And when it finally passed away, when it flatlined, I felt no sadness. Really, I just felt like good riddance. Good riddance to HBO Real Sports.
Steve, thank you so much. Appreciate you, and thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss a moment of Fearless.